welcome everybody to the, can you hear me okay? Yep. To the special Board of Finance meeting here on December 16th. The meeting will be called to order. Can we please stand up for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, a couple of items before we begin tonight's meeting. First order of business, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ed Basin to the Board of Finance. Good to have you here, Mr. Basin. As we know, Ed has plenty of town government experience with the RTM and with the Board of Selectmen, so we're glad to have him here on our Board of Finance. I do want to thank the board for its flexibility. It's somewhat late notice to be here tonight, December 16th. I'm very happy we're able to get 8 of us here. Jim Walsh did have a prior appointment that he could not get out of, so he is in New York City. So we're here tonight for 2 different reasons, but the primary reason is that the first select woman contacted me and requested that we have a special meeting as she intends to restructure her staff. And she's here tonight to review that restructuring plan. And the plan would require us to transfer funds. So let me go through the agenda and we'll get started. So item number 3 is to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $70,000 from Animal Control regular payroll and $15,000 from Library regular payroll to First Select Woman regular payroll to cover costs associated with department reorganization. Item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $200,000 from Debt Service Fund to Capital Non-Recurring Remediation to cover ongoing remediation costs. Now, I received an email today from Majority Leader Jill Vergara. She had asked us, as there's an RTM meeting, and they want to try and get here for some of this, to take item number 4 and make it item number 3, and take item number 3 and make it item number 4. So I told her that we would work to accommodate that. Does the board have an issue with changing the schedule?
So moved.
So moved. Can I have a second? All those in favor? Okay, we'll go to item number 4. So I'm going to read the item again, and we'll move it to the table. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $200,000 from Debt Service Fund to Capital Non-Recurring Remediation to cover ongoing remediation costs. Can I have a motion? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mrs. O'Clair. So this motion is now before us. Mr. Mayor, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, everybody knows what's going on.
Needs the microphone.
All right, this is going to be fun. I'll show you.
Yeah. Sorry, we have one microphone tonight.
Yeah, everyone is aware that we're having field pile issues and environmental issues and it costs money, and the Board of Finance during the year-end closeout process put $800,000 into non-recurring capital to expend on the remediation and testing programs, and they put another $1.3 million, I think, in the debt service fund, with the request for that money to be utilized specifically for remediation and testing, but also that before it is expended, that the requests would come before the Board of Finance to transfer the funds. So that's what. So we've had some overruns in a couple of the projects, and Mr. Carey, which has created a need for additional funds at this point, and Mr. Carey is here to discuss that.
Good evening, Brian Carey, Conservation Director, Town of Fairfield. So the overruns we're experiencing, we actually talked about during our last meeting where I was here, which I think was 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
So we had discussed these items, Gould Manor being one that we're still looking to move forward with. It was slightly above the bid, it's going to be above the bid amount to the tune of about $60,000 to $70,000. Again, that's just based on an estimate of the quantities of material that we'll be removing. And we went out and did 1 weekend of work at Jennings School, and based on the testing, there's additional work that needs to be done. All the proposals that have been sent to us by the remediation contractors were provided to you as part of the bid, as part of the backup for the agenda tonight. I can see that you actually have the highlighted items on your schedule of values. Those are all the items that are the additional work. We're still below the estimates that I was giving you. It's just it didn't occur to me that there was actually a benchmark of $800,000 you'd put in place back in September when we went. If that was the case, that could have probably just killed 2 birds with 1 stone last month and asked for the additional money. But again, as I discussed at the last meeting, we're going to work to get our hands around all these additional sites before we come back in the new year for any additional money, and we'll have that all laid out pretty succinctly. These were 2 of the first 3 sites that we moved forward with. Burroughs is done, completed. That was done within budget. It's just Gould Manor, as we've tested, we found more arsenic-related soils. And again, Jennings School Playground, same issue. Arsenic-related soils associated with the timber, railroad timbers from the playground.
Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, quick thing, Brian. Microphone.
Sorry, Brian, quick thing. I see in the documents the highlighted materials only comes up to 123,000, yet you're asking for 200.
Yeah, so the idea was that just in case there's something, because again, we're going back out to Jennings at Gould Manor, there shouldn't be an overage on Gould Manor at this time because we have it all well defined. But if there's an issue with Jennings School, we're going to try to tackle it over the Christmas break. And obviously it won't be meeting till January. So the idea would be to come back then and basically present to you any overages on that. I don't anticipate that's going to happen, but again, we're digging down deeper around the railroad ties, and as was evidenced the last time, there's just more out there. And again, this is associated with the playground railroad ties. It's not something that's bill pile related. It's just that when we begin testing for constituents, we're going to find secondary issues that may or may not be related to the fill pile. So in the sake of time, that's why finance director and me talked, and said, he basically said, well, how much do you anticipate it's going to cost? And we felt that that was a reasonable request, given that basically the last time we were here, we had like a bench stock, and we just really want to get that done. We can only work on the weekends on the Jennings School, and then over the Christmas break. So we want to get that resolved for the people as quickly as we can. And weather has actually been a factor in us trying to get that done. So that's kind of the bottom line. I don't anticipate it going over that though.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. So 2 weeks ago, I and Ms. Charlton asked a question, how soon do we need to give you money? And the answer was, well, we're just encumbering money, we're not paying bills. we're not paying bills, right? That's why we're pushing this 200,000. I'm okay with the number.
No, I'm
just wondering what happened in the 2 weeks, right?
Well,
I was not aware.
Oh
No, we're still only paid about $200,000 in actual cash. But the deal here is transparency. Before we spend it, come here. And at that point, when we met here last, I was not aware of these overages. As soon as I became aware, we talked, and we put a little cushion in there because we know we're going to spend at least that much, so it will get spent eventually.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the right answer.
no, we still have, the invoices are coming in, but obviously you can't do work until I come to the money, and I can't come to the money until I get approval.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
Thank you. I understand this is not fill pile related and that there was going to be a meeting with DEEP on other issues related to the fill pile. Do we have any more information? We were concerned in terms of what they might be asking us to do and the associated costs.
This is, so to the best of our estimation and knowledge, this is associated with the arsenic from the, I mean, really both sites. It's not, we found areas of arsenic polluted soils, whether it's from the railroad timbers or Gould Manor. The exact source of that material is not really known. Could be from, we talked about that last 2 weeks ago. You know, it's only a hypothesis that to say that's probably from some historical pesticide type use on the property, but we've been able to delineate the area where the fill had been used, and the expanded area is not necessarily, fill pile related. It's official surface. Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Kupchak, thank you.
I'm sorry, I actually met with the Department of Environmental and Energy Protection last week or the week before. I went with the town attorney and our environmental attorney, spent a little over 3 hours up there. We don't have the test results back that the prosecutor did with DEEP down at the pile site yet. So we don't have that number. We have to see those test results. We did do the RFPs that came in last week, Brian.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But obviously, they're not going to be able to give us a full level proposal until they see those test results and be able to give us a full remediation action plan. So we're not going to have that number. And that's just for the fill pile.
That's what I thought. So what's the timing on getting those results back and when you might
I spoke to the
come before
prosecutor
us again?
actually today, and we're still waiting. We're still waiting for those. Believe me, I wish we had them as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Separate question. It was reported in one of the local papers that the first select woman had approved baseline exposure testing for employees. What is the cost associated with that, and where is that in this analysis?
So that's being handled by the HR department. I don't know exactly where the funds for that testing is being taken from.
Director, those funds will be taken out of this bucket eventually, but the HR director is the one managing, and that was, I think, approved at the Board of Selectmen.
It has not been approved yet, so there's an agenda item on the 18th agenda. There's a contract, so we worked with Department of Public Health, and they recommended Yale Occupational Health Environmental Group. We had a couple of phone conversations with them about what the process is going to be. So we had originally talked about blood testing. They're going to do an in-depth review of the chemicals that the employees were exposed to. They're going to meet with the employees. They're going to review all the LEP documentation and put together a monitoring plan. The monitoring plan may or may not include blood testing, but there will be a monitoring plan that's developed by Yale for the town to follow for all employees, and they're based on the total exposure to whatever chemicals were out there. The cost for that is proposed as a cap of about $16,000, I believe. I don't know. It sounds like it's part of this this capture, but I can tell you that it's about 16,000. They're asking for 12,000 initially and saying they believe it can run up to 16,000 based off of whatever the findings are from that. But they plan on meeting with employees, talking with us, and then developing plans.
So you said 16,000, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, thank you. I misheard that at first. And just another question. So, well, as a follow-up on that, should that, once that's approved, that should be added to this, that will be captured as part of this cost, correct? Okay, so we've got $200,000, which has some cushion in it, so we don't meet again, that's fine, right? Okay. My second question, and this is maybe more procedural, but there's several items on here that show pending purchase orders, some of which I think Burroughs, for example, has been completed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep,
What
those are all have been converted.
Okay,
So the ones that have not are ones that, so Burroughs has been completed, and Jennings School has been opened. So those are all in place. That should be updated.
gotcha. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Charlton. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Clark?
Could you just refresh us on what our requirements are as a town? Like now we're testing fields and coming up with things that are non-fill pile related. And so whatever we find, we're required to remediate, no matter what, or is it, what standard are we using?
So right now, the town is only has a notice of violation against it for the fill pile itself. Everything we've been doing to address sites throughout town is being done voluntarily by the town under our LEP. There's not necessarily a strict regulatory framework that DEP says we need to do to meet a certain standard. They've told us to rely on our LEP. It's a little confusing, but we are using the RSRs, the remediation standard regulations, to basically frame our remediation activities. There's all this discussion about a recreational standard that was developed by the Department of Public Health. That was done within the framework of the remediation, Connecticut DEP remediation standard regulations. So right now, we're just proceeding on a voluntary basis and using those regulatory mechanisms as a framework for meeting compliance with the state.
Okay. So where do we expect to end up? Do we have any idea, like, what the potential is out there?
So there is a list that's been put together by the health department in consultation with the Public Works crew, using documents that were generated every time Public Works went to go get a load of material for the fill pile. That's what has driven the generation of our site list, and also residents calling in requesting or saying that work had been done near or adjacent to their property. We'll go out there, investigate that, see if there's any documentation. But to date, we've tested numerous sites. Some have come back with, we can say, that's likely associated with the Julian pile. There's sites that, like Jennings School, which is incidental contamination associated with wood timbers, and it's just going to continue. We're going to have to continue to go through all these properties. Some may be related to the Julian fill pile, some may not, and then likely some will not have any issues at all. The one thing to note is that out of all the sites that we have tested, there's only been one that's had a minor exceedance of PCBs, which is what kind of has driven the notice of violation at the landfill. So it's not this widespread PCB issue in the town that we have determined to date. And hopefully that's a trend that will continue in the future as we continue to investigate a lot of these sites.
And then the health testing that Ms. Carlton was referring to, is this what all you expect is the 16,000 of testing? And are we required to do it, or we're just voluntarily considering doing this?
I mean, I think the HR director could discuss that with you a little bit more in depth. You know, there's occupational exposures and then there's secondary exposures. I think there's concern among the DPW rank and file that they've had some occupational exposures. Everyone's had exposures to PCBs. If you eat fish from Long Island Sound, you're going to have trace amounts. There's trace amounts in the environment. The idea of behind the health testing of the medical monitoring is to determine whether there was anything that, you know, is raised to an occupational exposure. But again, if the health director wants to get up, and I think there's an abundance of concern about from some of the employees down in the DPW garage, and this is kind of a way to manage that concern and that fear that there has been some type of exposure.
And then I guess my final question, have we, and I don't know if it's for Brian or not, have we alerted our insurance companies and have we put them on notice and filed claims?
Yes, that's been taken care of.
Okay, Mr. Basin?
Yeah, thank you. I guess this is more of a suggestion or planning about how we're going to identify these costs. From this point forward, I think it would be a good exercise, Bob, for your department to start identifying specific costs that are related to fill pile, bond fill pile, and what Brian just identified as a dead end, nothing turned to fruition. I don't want to have to go back or I wouldn't want to have to go back and recreate the wheel when it comes time for litigation of what our actual incurred costs are. You know, I could just envision opposing counsel shredding us on the fact that we're commingling operations. I think we need, if we know that a certain project that we're spending money on is related to fill pile, I think that should be identified and separated.
Yeah, Mr. Carey and I have discussed that very item, and some of it is relatively easy, none of it's easy to differentiate, but some of it is not so easy. I'll let Mr. Carey speak to that further.
Yeah, so I've been tracking all the costs, and obviously as it's being done, and you know, as we go through it and are able to say, yes, this may be a fill-related issue, and this is not, I mean, kind of starting to separate those costs out. So that's something that we can easily do.
Yeah, that's good. I just encourage you to perform that exercise and document it, because you know the way the lawyers are. They love the documentation.
Mr. Testano?
And just quick, Brian, which, was it Go Manor that had the PCBs? We're just curious.
No, so there's a site behind the tennis bubble, Old Dam Road. There was two spots, you know, within 10 feet of each other that had PCBs above 1 and below 3. And there's some evidence to suggest that there might have been a transformer spill or dumping going on there sometime back in the 80s and 90s. So actually, I have someone going to the DEP to check the records, the spill records, to see if there's anything on file, actually documenting that. But those aren't very high levels either, over 1, below 10, and there's also, you know, there's also transformers and things like that that were kind of back there historically. So to say it's from one source or the other, very hard. We're trying to pin that down.
And I'm just curious, is there any site that's complete, you know, done with remediation or near done? I know we talked about Go Manor at our last
Burroughs.
I think you said that right. I'm just
Yeah,
curious
so-
on the Gold Manor
If
piece.
you go up there, you'll see it's all backfilled. We're gonna sod it in the spring, at the end of March, so it's ready for the soccer season as soon as possible. But there are a lot of sites that have been tested and found to be, clean or, no association with any contamination. It's just been closed out.
Back to the fill pile just for 1 second. When we talk about the fill pile, the berm is not inclusive of that, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Did the DEP test the berm as well? Because I'm curious what the under-over is on the berm at this point, right?
So I haven't seen their data or their maps of where the testing was done. They were up there for between 2 and 3 days. They had an excavator up there, digging basically, I believe, everywhere, doing test bits on the entire pile. We're currently in the process of reviewing the request for qualifications from environmental consulting firms. I'm going to try to schedule those interviews, shortlist them after the first of the year, and then I'll work to put together a proposal that the consultants on the shortlist will respond to in order to address the NOV that was submitted to the town. And that will include developing a sampling plan for the fill pile itself that will be reviewed and approved by the DEP prior to doing any more work up there. Now that we have a notice of violation against us, we can start to put together a regulatory framework that we can agree on with the DEP, because the last thing I want to do is go up there and test and not have some kind of conclusive solution to the problem, and where we're just kind of moving the goalposts. Obviously, I've said this, you probably get sick of me hearing me say it, but unfortunately, it's a data-driven process, and, data requires you to collect more data, which requires you to collect more data until you get your hands around it. But we're going to try to limit the amount of mobilizations so that we can speed this up and really get some data to sit down and determine what the solution is, and basically satisfy the NOV that was issued by the state.
Okay, Mr. DeWitt? Any further questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, back to the board. No further questions. This motion is on the table. So, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, I'll read the motion and ask for it to be brought before us. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $70,000 from Animal Control regular payroll and $15,000 from Library regular payroll to First Select Woman regular payroll to cover costs associated with department reorganization. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. DeWitt, second by Mr. Testani. This motion is before us. We'll turn it over to Ms. Kupchak. Welcome, Ms. Kupchak.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd first like to say thank you for holding this special meeting tonight. I do appreciate it. Today is the 14th actual business day that I have served as the first select woman. And it's been quite a ride. I refer to it when people ask me, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. We have a very busy town and we have a lot of challenging issues. I would like to, before I begin, I would like to introduce my chief of staff who was hired today, who started today. Actually, I was very lucky to wrangle her away from a very good job that she has. She's amazing, and I hope you all get to know her quite well. She's going to be a real attribute to our community and our town. Her name is Jackie Bertolone. So welcome, Jackie. It's nice to have a little help. So I'll just start. You were all received, and I want to apologize for, I think you received an incomplete packet that wasn't completely done. As I said earlier, it's been a really busy beginning start off, and when you don't have any staff around, so it's really difficult. Meeting with a lot of different people. Obviously, I mentioned I was up at Deep. I actually met with the prosecutor for several hours today. There's a lot going on in our community, as you were aware. And so I'm sorry if you received something that was incomplete, but you do have it, hopefully, the completed one. I just want to say that, you know, running for this position during the campaign over the last 6 to 8 months, and even running last year as a state representative, you know, you really have a chance to learn and listen to the people of your community. And what I heard over and over again throughout the campaign, from the spring, summer, and fall, were that people wanted something different for our community, wanted to see our town move into the 21st century. Not only did they want more transparency and accountability, but they wanted our town to move forward. And so I heard that over and over again, that people wanted to, the phrase that comes to mind was, we shouldn't be doing what we always do. So when I won the election on election evening, you know, I first started to think about it that next morning. Well, how am I going to be a change agent? How am I going to transform the town of Fairfield, where I grew up, where generations of my family raised their families here and ran small businesses? How can I move our town into the future? And immediately what came to mind was, we can't do what we always do. And I thought about how we reorganize. So I reached out to a lot of our neighboring communities, and if you look at one of the slides, it has a comparison of other towns and how they manage their front offices. And so we brought some are larger, but some of the comparisons are similar size to Fairfield. And as you can see, those towns really have a much stronger and robust front office. So if you just look at some of this, even the first slide. So you look at the first slide, and then you'll look at the key projects and issues, right? We were just talking about the fill pile. The fill pile is a major issue in our town. It is probably the biggest issue that I've ever experienced in my 55 years in this town. It is serious. You're asking questions as elected members of this town. I'm asking questions as the first select woman of this town, and there's a lot more to come. And we're going to have a lot of work to do. Just managing this situation on its own is a full-time job, and to make sure it's done correctly, and that the public trusts that it's being done correctly. And I had pledged that I will do that for our community, and every one of us have to take a role in that as well. Economic development is a huge issue that I have talked about throughout the campaign and want to take it quite seriously. Not just having a more robust economic development department, but actually being a first select woman who visits businesses inside the state and outside the state to try to lure them here so that we can build our grand list. These are some of the engagements that I want to do as the first select woman of Fairfield. And I think it's vitally important. And obviously operational budgeting prioritization, that's a huge issue. All of the meetings that a first select person or woman has to attend, just because you know you're a new business and you want your first select woman there to welcome you and cut the ribbon, or you're going to an Eagle Scout ceremony, or engaging with the community on a number of different things. That's the role of me. But there's other things. You meet with the departments, with your chief of staff and your chief administrative officer, and you work together and you go back and you strategize the things you want to modernize, the changes you want to make. And then they go and implement the things that I want them to do, the things that the community are asking for. So you can read most of that. Excuse me, I've been talking a lot today. So just that's some of it. You saw the comparisons to the other town, the job descriptions. I mean, obviously these are job descriptions. Working in government, there's always like any other business. There's job descriptions, and then there's the real life, right? So there's this sort of like a blueprint, but there's so much more that comes on. 2 weeks really in this office, and I would invite any one of you to come and shadow with me for the whole day, so you can see how incredibly busy our town hall is and our first selectmen's office is. People come in all day long. People call all day long. There's hundreds of emails that come in on any given day on numerous issues, and the people want to be responded to. So that takes a lot of time and effort, and people have a right to be responded to. This is their community, and they have questions. And I think I covered most of what's in here. And then I would just open it up for questions, and I thank you for the time to be able to speak to you. There's the one last one on the back, I'm sorry, FY21 funding. So I know there was some misinformation going around. Some people called me today. I was mostly in meetings, so I didn't, but I guess there was a lot of sort of fever going on. And I mentioned this in my inauguration speech, that, you know, we need to speak to each other eye to eye or over the phone and not through social media. So there was a lot of sort of misinformation spread around. We are not cutting the library. I just want to be 100% clear. There is a position that was frozen, I guess, by the prior administration 2 years ago, and has not been filled. And so I guess it was, the HR directors here could speak more closely about that. There were several options to transfer these funds, but want to do it in a way that is transparent and honest, and that could actually carry forward in the next budget cycle. So these positions, and the animal control position, that's a position that has been filled in 3 years. These are funds that are in that account now. I would like to make these positions, well, the new position of Chief Administrative Officer, a permanent position. I believe our town needs to come to town hall. It's like actually being in 1960. We have so many things we need to do. Our town can't move into the future in the manner in which we are running it right now. And so I would say to you that this is not about me. I'm not asking for staff for myself, because we could run the town like we've always run it. And we can end up with the results with scandals or problems or lack of oversight. It's simply too big. This is almost a $400 million organization. We have a very engaged and active community who have a lot of questions. We have issues sprouting up all throughout the town. And people expect their town government to be proactive, engaged, and involved. And that is the kind of first select woman that I have been asked to be by the residents of this community. And that's the kind of first select woman I want to be for the residents of this community. So I would open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kupchak. What I would advise the board is any questions in regards to the job responsibilities, the job descriptions, or the purpose, we'll go to Ms. Kupchak. Before we start asking questions about numbers, I do want to turn it over to Mr. Mayor to walk us through some of these charts. So we could either ask questions to Ms. Kupchak or turn it over to Mr. Mayor to kind of walk through the numbers with us. It's up to the board. Any questions for Ms. Kupchak right now? All right, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you can walk us through the numbers here and in regards to the transfer. Okay.
All right. There are 3 financial slides. First one, the title is Cost of Reorganization. That's where I'll begin. There are 4 columns there. These slides pertain to the town budget as a whole, not just the departments, okay? What I mean by that is, for example, the healthcare, pension, OPEB, 401As, those aren't in the individual departmental budgets. Those are in separate parts of the general fund. Okay, so this is the entire general fund. First column is the 2020 fiscal year budget for the chief of staff and the administrative assistant, and the total cost of those 2 positions as currently funded. So you can see the salary of the chief of staff is part-time, $50,000. The Social Security number is low there, $720. because part-timers are in Mid-America alternate Social Security programs, so the town does not pay Social Security, they just pay Medicare for part-time people. The administrative assistant, now, I'm not sure it's been stated, but this position ends up being eliminated, right? So the administrative assistant is $76,000, Social Security, healthcare, pension. That person was in the pension plan, the defined benefit pension plan. That was the cost, the normal cost, $6,085 for that, and the OPEB. So the total of the current budget is $161,991.
The administrative assistant was also in the union, correct?
No.
None of
The second column to the right is the annual budget for the proposed staff. Right, so you have a full-time chief of staff. If you see there, the salary is $50,000 for half-time. So you see, this is really only a 7% increase, actually. It goes to full-time. It's only a $7,000 difference if you look at it as a full-time equivalent position. And you got, and the total there is $157,000 when you add in the Social Security, healthcare, the 401A, and the OPEB. The chief of staff, excuse me, the chief administrative officer coming in at $120,000, and the same components, you see that's $167,000, so the total there is $370,000. The difference between the current budget, the prior staff and the proposed staff, $158,421. And then the last column on the right is the incremental difference. What that is, that's a measure of if everyone in the 2020 budget worked their budgeted hours and all the costs were per budget through December 15th. And that money was expended. And then the new staff comes on December 16th. And then you take the dollars required to pay the new staff and the associated benefits for the new staff from December 16th through June 30th. And you subtract that from the current budget, and basically you get a number that's $85,811. So looking at the town globally, all right, all in, the entire general fund, if one went all the way through December 15, and the other one just plugged in December 16, that would be the additional cost to the town for 2020. Okay, then going to the next page, basically there's,
Mr. Mayor?
sir.
You said additional cost to the town. What I think we mean is additional cost to the first selectwoman's budget?
No, to the total town budget, including healthcare, OPEB, everything.
So, are you going to break down how, are you going to break down how the first select woman is paying for her now hired full-time chief of staff? Is that from her source, is that what you're asking?
That's from my current budget that's already
So,
in place.
my question is, to the town, I understand that's kind of global, but from the first select woman's department's budget, how is she paying for the chief of staff? Is that from her department's budget? Where is that payment coming from? And because we're being asked to look at some transfers here, and there are other positions that are being requested that we pay for, how do we break this out in terms of the transfers versus what the first select woman and her office is paying for?
Talking about departmentally specific, assuming that that the part-time chief of staff who worked 4 months, paid once, used 1/3 of the $50,000, that'd be $17,000. So there'd be $32,000 remaining there. the same with the, what number did I just say? 32, thank you, because I'm doing this on the fly here. The 76,000, again, 1/3 of that would be 25,000, so there's $50,000 there. So there would be $82,000 available in the budget for those two salaries combined. The new person is working 6.5 months at 107. That's about $55,000, $56,000. So there would be plenty of money in her budget to pay that person's salary.
So just to clarify then. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, okay. So can you just specifically from Ms. Kupchak's budget, she is paying for the chief of staff from her budget, correct?
Correct.
And how much money is there left in her budget that we might then use for these other positions?
It's $25,000. I mean,
No.
Bob said it's about $80,000.
I just want
minus
clarification, Mr.
55. Yeah,
DeWitt.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay, could you repeat that for us, Mr. Whitmere?
Repeat your question, please.
I just want separation of what Ms. Kupchak's budget is paying for her chief of staff, what remains that then might cover the other positions, and then distinguish that from the transfer of funds that we're being asked to do.
I don't have the breakout of I don't have the budget in front of me to break out of what's been spent, exactly what's not been spent. What I'm saying is, I think, is that given that the current chief of staff, one hired today, has got 107,000 salary. I don't have a calculator. So if you take 107, divide it by 12, multiply it by 6, divide it by 12, multiply it by 6.5, you'll get a number. And I see you have 3 people helping me out here.
I think you answered the question.
Let me answer it again. 107 divided by 12 equals 8,900.
About 58,000.
58,000. I think I said 57 earlier, right? 56. So $58,000, all right, is required to pay her salary, all right?
That's on the sheet. This top line says that the current state from the current budget, now this is
Can I just go ahead and finish?
So, if we take the annual budget of chief of staff and then roll in our new chief of staff, the difference is 102,000, and we do the math and figure out that this is not a full year that we're having to pay for. It's approximately 6 months, because we're halfway through the fiscal year, 55,000. So what you calculated before, which I think is accurate, is Ms. Kupchak's budget has about $80,000 remaining to pay for staff. Doesn't even care who it is. If that's a true number, 80,000 minus 55 is 25,000 is left over. So Ms. Kupchak's budget, I think where you're getting at is, Ms. Kupchak's budget today can pay for our new chief of staff without having to do anything. Plus have 25,000 left over, right?
Something like that, yes.
So, does the motion have to be amended in some way? Am I missing something there? Because it talks about, no, I guess it doesn't. So does the motion for number 3 cover the chief of staff, or we don't have to worry about that? You know, follow what I'm saying, Bob?
The motion covers everything. Would cover, I know the CAO is not hired today, but the motion would cover the CAO
Right.
and the chief of staff, both
But
starting today.
We don't really have to act on the chief of staff because the first select woman's, it's in the budget already.
You
It's
don't-
it's
you
in
don't
her
know what
budget.
You're not acting on positions here. You're basically acting on a dollar transfer, all right? There's an organizational request.
I understand
based upon a
that.
defined need. That defined need is well-served with additional, it's actually not even additional staff, right? Because you're basically, look at it this way. You're eliminating an AA position.
I get it.
You're eliminating an ACO position. You're eliminating a library accounts clerk's position. You're eliminating 3 positions. And you're adding a CAO position and a half a COS position. So the end result is actually a negative 1.5 FTE.
In heads, that's correct.
Here's what I mean, if we don't mind, I just want him to get through this presentation, and then maybe he'll answer questions that you may have while he goes through it. So Bob, you continue.
So basically, so again, looking at it globally, which is different than looking at it departmentally, if you go to the fiscal year 20 funding page, you see that the assistant animal control officer's total cost of town is $102,000. You got the select woman office staffing restructure. This is again budgeted perspective. We're balancing the budget from the total town perspective. It's $87,811. We talked about that number on the prior page. There's some renovation going on in the first selectman office. $15,000. I think there's cushion there, which is kind of a very preliminary number. So you got $100,000. So basically, just the savings from not hiring the assistant animal control officer covers the total cost of the staffing plus the renovation with a savings of, that's a small number, $1 million, I wish.
Good job.
$1,316. So going to the next page, as Ms. Kupchak, Selectwoman mentioned during her presentation, part of her focus was to do this in a manner that carried forward so it doesn't have a cliff impact on next year's budget. And so if you look at the fiscal year 21 funding page, you see that the savings, and these were all increased by 2%, except for healthcare. Healthcare was increased by 7% to get a fiscal year 21 estimated projected funding price. You get $105,000 that would be spent for the assistant animal control officer, $81,000 total for the library account clerk, total of $186,000. The total cost for the select person office reorg is $158,000. So the net savings to the town for this reorg combined with the commitment to defund these 2 positions is $27,000.
Okay, thank you. So we're reducing headcount, Mr. Mayor, total?
Well, actually, yeah, we're reducing headcount, we're decreasing the budget, we're not laying anyone off, and there's no impact on operations. Everything's been accounted for and taken care of through reasonable operational reassignments.
All right, let's talk about the vacancies real quick. Let's talk about the animal control vacancy. How long has it been vacant?
That's been vacant for 3 years almost exactly, and the account clerk position 2 years almost exactly, a little more than 2 years.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I'm going to pass it to the board first.
Why are these positions vacant?
The question is, why do we have a vacant position still in the budget for 3 years and for 2 years? Why hasn't that position been eliminated?
I cannot speak to the animal control officer. Mr. Chief Liddy is here, and imagine you can speak to that. I can speak to the account clerk. But basically, we identified a way to do some restructuring in the library that we thought would work, that would save the position, but we wanted to test it out to see if it did, and it has. So that's why that one didn't.
All right, can you get a little more detail on that, on the position that you're?
Yeah, there were two positions that were doing, one was doing the purchase requisition posting and all that type of stuff, and the other one was doing the other end. You know, you have your controls, somebody orders something, somebody else has to receive it, can't be the same, you know, so basically, there was two people doing the two positions, and so what's happening now is, and they were doing those positions part-time. They were also doing other work part-time, working the front desk, that type of thing, not the circulation desk. So we basically, you're doing a technical position plus a non-technical position. We combined the two technical positions and transferred the non-technical positions to lower paid part-time people.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, did you talk to anyone at the library about this position?
I spoke today, actually I had two meetings today with Elaine, one with her and myself, and Joe Foley, the purchasing director, and the second one with the two of us, Elaine and I, with the first selectman and the HR director. She's well aboard with this and understood it was coming and has been planning for it. We've been working on it.
She was not concerned about services at the library?
Not at all.
Can I ask Chief Liddy to come on up, please? Good evening. Thank you, Chief. Can you just give us a little background on this position that's been vacant for 3 years, and we just want to hear from you and anyone from your department about the effects on the town, if there are any, with the elimination of this position?
So approximately 3 years ago, an employee resigned, and we did not fill the position at that time. If you remember, it came at a time where there was great uncertainty about state funding and what was coming to the municipality. So we were asked to put the position on hold, and we did. We found that we've been able to function. Our levels of service are about equal to what they have been. There has been a greater expenditure of overtime associated with it, which was offset by some of the salary, but not a lot. That wasn't a huge number. And so over the course of 3 years, I think animal control has provided an acceptable level of service to Fairfield. No emergency call has gone unanswered. And we concede that we can probably do without this position.
Okay. So in the current, in the budget 2021, you did not plan on filling this vacancy?
I think there's still time to withdraw that, but we had included it in next year's budget.
Okay. Did you have intention of filling it?
No.
All right. Ms. Charlton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Mayor, you said that we are reducing headcount and that we're saving money in the budget, I think. But in fact, we're not reducing headcount because these heads were never hired and were never intended to be hired, and these positions have been vacant for years. Budgeted headcount, but not real headcount, right?
We're reducing budgeted headcount, thereby reducing the budget by the amounts associated.
I understand that, but we're not reducing real headcount. We never, just hear me out, we never hired these folks. The positions have been empty for a couple of years, and what I just heard was that we did not intend to hire these. So I guess...
That's correct.
and I'm not trying to be critical, I don't know why they were carried forward in the budget, but this is not, this is not reducing headcount, because if we weren't doing any of this, these would be savings that would fall through to the surplus, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so just wanted to be clear about that. Because I think, and I think about this a little bit differently. I think that the budget transfer is a funding mechanism, and that's fine, we have to have a funding mechanism. But, again, these are not existing positions. We're not, as the chairman pointed out, this isn't going to affect any current employees or anything that we're doing, because these positions aren't filled. So the way I look at this is, let's separate the two, right? I think we look at the reorganization that the first select woman is requesting on its own merits and based on its own costs, which is on a full year basis, $158,000, right? That's going to be the cost going forward. And that's a real cost. It's not really being net against anything else, because we were not spending that other money to begin with. I know we budgeted it, but we didn't spend it, weren't intending to spend it. Am I correct there?
There's no intent here to draw a correlation between the various positions. The intent here was to show the body and people who are interested, because many people are interested in what's happening with the budget. So here is,
Gotcha.
here's a couple of things that are happening. No, you're definitely correct. There's no correlation between the two.
Okay,
But there is a financial budgetary impact.
And I understand the budgetary impact. I just wanted to be clear about that, because this, we've made a few statements talking about money we're saving, and we're not, the quote-unquote savings is coming from the fact that we were not intending ever to, fill these positions that were budgeted. So I just want to be clear about that. And I think if I can, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Marmion, but I think the question before about the first select woman's budget and where that was coming from was getting to the question about the charter and kind of what as a body we have to approve, which is transfers between departments, departmental line items. And so I think, again, don't want to speak for you, but I think that was the essence of the question, was that if the chief of staff position can be funded by the first select woman's budget, before anything else is done, then I understand that it's in this analysis for purposes of transparency and helping everyone understand what's being done here, but that in itself is not something that we are required to act on, correct? Because the person is already hired because they could be hired, because that's covered in the existing budget.
That is a correct statement.
Okay. And I think maybe the confusion, I guess, was on the numbers. So we've got, and I'm going to talk in terms of full year numbers just because it's a little bit easier, but is it correct to only look at the salary, because the other line items here are sitting in other departments, healthcare, et cetera?
When you're talking about departmental budgets, yes.
Okay. So I think the confusion may have been that the chief of staff salary, the differential is $57,000, and the savings, or I don't want to say savings, the administrative assistant position, okay, maybe that's it. So that $57,000, the administrative position that is being eliminated, if you will, before hiring the CAO is $76,000. Is that how that works in terms of the budget being able to cover it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charlton. Just before we let Chief Liddy sit back in the audience, does anyone have any other further questions for Chief Liddy? No. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you. Wow, it's weird being here like this. Just a point of clarification. Although Mr. Mayor was talking about budgeted savings, and it's true, you're absolutely correct, the actual money wasn't spent by the town in the budget, so it's not a savings on spending. It actually is a savings for the taxpayer. Because when those numbers aren't included in the budget, It's not included in the taxation. So that that money would be, right now, collected from the taxpayer and go towards the town surplus. Whereas if in the budget, it wasn't approved at those higher levels. It was approved at the lower levels for the reduction of the 1.5 positions. The taxpayer would actually see a net benefit of that savings. So I just wanted to clarify it like that. Thank you.
True. Theoretically, though, that goes back to the taxpayer because it becomes part of the surplus, which can then theoretically be.
Hold on, okay, hold on. Yeah, let's not talk over each other. So, Mrs. Charlton, you have a follow-up?
I get it. I think we're saying the same things. I think we're thinking about it the same.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Over here, comments? Ms. Marmy? Mr. Mottola?
These are questions.
Questions for Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, just hang on 1 second. Any questions for Ms. Kupchak?
So, Ms. Kupchak, first of all, I want to thank you for calling me a few days ago and discussing this proposal. I absolutely have no issue with you wanting to have a full-time chief of staff. I think it's absolutely appropriate, down at 60,000 plus citizens and the budget that we have. I think that's necessary, and it sounds like you've hired somebody, and congratulations on that. I thought it was not a very intelligent thing to do 2.5 years ago for the RTM to cut that position down to a half a chief of staff position. So it's good that you're doing that. Before you became the first select woman, did you have a chance or an opportunity to sit down with anyone in the first selectman's office to discuss what their roles and responsibilities were? For example, did you have an opportunity to discuss what the part-time chief of staff did for the town?
My transition team did get some information. However, I was hoping to, but I wasn't afforded the opportunity to have any transition meetings with the former first selectman.
Okay, and why was that? Do you know why? Okay, all right. And I have some questions maybe to Mr. Hipson about some of the job descriptions, but I can wait, or unless you want me to ask them now. Do you want to follow up on this?
I want to make one budget statement. It's more of a statement than a question. And I understand your Ms. Charlton's perspective, but as a budget, and Mr. Flynn's absolutely right. There is a savings, right? I think there's a double savings here, because what has happened in this budget I got my hand on, both these roles are in here. And everyone in this room paid some amount of the fees to pay for those people, whether we hired them or not. So to take 150,000, whatever that number is, and let it sit dormant and go to surplus, okay, that's nice. But to take that 150,000 and actually use it for something, and use it where we're getting real benefit, I mean, there's a value proposition there. I personally rather spend $150,000 having a chief of staff and a CAO, and giving them the opportunity to shine and show us that those roles make sense. And hey, in a year from now, if they're not making sense, then I guess we'll reassess, right? But I feel like there's not only benefit, there's almost double benefit to not spending the money rather than spending it usefully.
Okay, before we bring Mr. Hipson up, any follow-up on Mr. Mottola's comments or Mr. DeWitt? Mr. Hipson?
Good evening.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Hipson. For the first time, we received the job descriptions for these various positions. I guess the first question, for the job description for Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff, were these already job descriptions that were in existence prior to you coming tonight, or is this something that has recently just been created?
These have been developed recently.
Okay, and can you tell me how you went about developing these descriptions?
Yeah, I went to the Sherman website, I went to other municipalities. Quite frankly, I've been in other municipalities where there were chief of staffs and chief administrative officers, so I called on some of that knowledge. I looked at different budgets, and and then speaking with and getting information from the first select woman and from others on the team about what they expected to have these individuals do. I created the job descriptions off of that.
Is there, and maybe there's an understanding, but maybe this language needs to be added to these job descriptions, and I have to, maybe it's in here, I just saw these for the first time tonight. Is there an understanding that for the chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff, and also the CAO, that these individuals will serve at the pleasure of the first select woman or a future first select man or woman?
So from an HR perspective and a charter perspective, none of these positions are listed in the charter, so they do not have the protections of that. That would require, and that was discussed as part of this, it would require going to the RTM with an ordinance if there was any decision to make a change to that and making any management structure to what's announced in the charter, and to give those employees greater protections than at will. I don't know if that's going to, so I have not been advised of whether that is a down the road process for these positions or not.
So from my perspective, and maybe people disagree, these positions should be positions that serve at the pleasure of the first select woman or first selectman, because you don't want to saddle these positions with future first select men or women. You just don't. That's my perspective. I think that's important, and I hope the administration realizes that, and because I would think that's inappropriate. But that's just my opinion on that.
John, I would just say that I think they've always been political positions, right? So, I mean, each individual who's elected picks and chooses how they want to run their office. I mean, obviously evidenced by other communities and municipalities, they run their office similar to the way that I'm requesting, with more staff. So it's more professional, and you have more oversight, and you're more responsive to the community.
And then I just have one follow-up, and I'll be done for now. And this could be for you, Emma, or you, Mr. Hipson, or Ms. Kupchak. I appreciate that you have on page 4 or 5 of the deck sheet, position and salary listing, executive branch, and you have some other municipalities listed there, and they all do it a little differently. Did anybody have an opportunity to speak with any of the municipalities, the chief of staffs, mayors, first selectmen, anybody in these municipalities to discuss how their offices operate and the benefit, or maybe not the benefit, that they're getting from the staffing of these positions?
Yes, I did.
Who'd you speak?
I spoke to Greenwich, and I spoke to Stratford. So Stratford, and so they do a lot of the same things that we're listing here. I mean, obviously, most of you have worked in professional environments, and everybody does everything, right? So, and especially in government, everybody jumps in everywhere because there's always something going on. But what they've suggested, or what prompted me to request the additional person, was they seem to have a real handle on their issues, right? Their everyday issues. They're dealing with stuff. They're having their meetings. They're having their town halls. They're dealing with the day-to-day that comes into the office. And there's a lot. There's a lot. Dealing with, what do we have, 13 departments, heads, and all of the different stuff. But they're also innovating. So for example, the CAO in Stratford actually goes on conferences and engages with businesses and works with the economic development department, and evidenced by the fact that they were lucky enough to secure Amazon for their town, which is a huge home run. So that's a huge thing. Also deals with what I was saying earlier, where they sit down with the department heads, all three, the chief of staff, CAO, and the first, in their case, mayor, in our case, first select woman, and talk about the departments and really get a flavor and understanding of them. And go back into the office and strategize and discuss. And then the CAO goes back to those departments and really works with those department heads to talk about really finding modernization techniques and technologies and savings and efficiencies. That takes real work. That's not something you can do on the fly, a couple-hour meeting. That's repeated work. That's going back in there. That's sitting down with the people who work there, listening to what they're doing, talking to the department, watching how they interact, watching what they're doing to learn more about it. It takes a lot of work to make change. I mean, listen, we could run the town the way we're running it, and we'll, running around making sure that we're taking care of everything. But we're not going to move into the future. We're simply not going to do it. I mean, I haven't left the office before 11 o'clock in a single night. And you're just doing what's coming on your desk. You're not being somebody who's proactive, doing something different, trying to modernize our town. I mean, our librarian came today. I had a nice conversation with her, a lovely woman. And she showed me that our town has her filling out payroll sheets. She has a full-time payroll sheet. I think there's 22 full-time employees at the main branch. And then she has a part-time payroll sheet that literally is passed around to all of these people to sign how much hours they worked, and then 3 people have to sign off on it. It takes an extraordinary amount of time to do that. Can you imagine a town like ours as literally doing this, passing around papers? We don't have a system in place that someone punches in, has a badge, and chimes in to come in with their little keypad. We have a Board of Finance meeting with 2 microphones.
Well, normally we have
I think we might have modernized that a little bit in our community. And honestly, I think our economic development, and I'm going to actually come back and ask for, for additions to our economic development department. I think it is one of the most crucial departments in our entire town government. The one that can really generate income for this town. Because let's face it, we're going to have to build up our grand list in a serious way, and we have to do it with a more robust economic development department. We have to be constantly working on this, and the first select woman needs to be actively engaged in it, actively engaged, meeting with these companies, talking to them, and meeting with our current companies, making sure they're happy, making sure they're not going to leave our town, and then also engaging with the universities. Maybe they could assist us with some of the things in our town, like some of the capital projects that we may have coming down the line in our schools. Those are dialogues, those are conversations. That is building relationships, and it takes time. It takes time to do those things. But those are the kinds of things that I heard the people of Fairfield ask me to do as their leader. They asked me to do those things, and I want to do them. I want to deliver for our residents. And that's why I'm asking for it. I know it's a tough sell, believe me. I don't like having asked for money. Listen, I've been in office 2 weeks. I'm sitting before you asking you for money. But I'm doing it not for myself. I'm doing it for our community, to make our town better and not just do what we always do.
And then I'll move on. You've been in office for 2 weeks. You have a brand new chief of staff that's starting today.
Yeah.
Why is there such a sense of urgency to do this at a special meeting when we're right around the corner from the budget process? When you could sell this not only to the Board of Finance, but you're going to have to sell this one way or the other to the RTM at some point. I mean, that's the concern I have. And I'm looking at job descriptions for the first time tonight, and I don't like doing that. And I'm looking at a new deck sheet for the first time tonight. It's hard for me to vote on something like this because I'm seeing a lot of this stuff for the first time tonight. That's my concern right now. Not that it could be the greatest idea in the world, but I'm having that concern. Why is there such a sense of urgency to do this right now?
Because the budget doesn't end for 7 months, John. 7 months. I don't want to sit and do nothing or just do what we always do for 7 months. The people of this town deserve the best I can give them. And I want to give them my all. I can't even sleep at night because I have so many good ideas that I want to implement. I'm one person. I do have to actually sleep. But I need help. I need help to implement these strategies to move our town forward. And frankly, in a 4-year term, I don't think the people of Fairfield should have to wait 7 months. I want to get going now. I'm mad I have to wait 2 weeks. I would have asked on day 1. And I'm sorry for getting this to you late, but again, I didn't have any staff till today. So, these people are also working in their departments, everybody's busy. And I have a lot of meetings, and again, I'll refer to it again. The fill pile is taking up a tremendous amount of my time, a tremendous amount. And I have to do it, and I have to do it right. So there's a lot going on in our town, and I'm just asking for your help to do what the people of Fairfield asked me to do for them.
So, Ms. Kupchak, on the CAO, we have the general responsibilities, we have the essential duties and responsibilities. So how are you going to measure success? What do you want out of this CAO? And you can say, you know what, the money was well spent, this is what the town received from this position, and this is how we're going to measure the success of this position.
Well, like I said, I spoke to the other towns. They're successful. Their towns are actually doing better. Evidenced by the fact that Stratford hired a CAO, and a year later, they got Amazon. That's going to pay for that CAO 100 times over. Those are the kinds of things, modernizing our departments for efficiencies. I know we can do this. I know we can save the money that more than pays for this office. More than pays for it. We have a $400 million budget. You got to hire for talented people. You have to pay for talent. Talent costs something, right? And I think what's kind of happened over the years is people are like, oh, government, it's all they can afford, so just hire whoever you can get. I think our town deserves better than that. I think we should hire the best people to do the best job.
Thank you. So Mr. Testani has a follow-up, then I'll go to Ms. Moran.
Thanks, Sheila. Just have a quick follow-up. I'll give it right back, I promise. Just a quick thing, and it's probably my corporate mind kicking into overgear, but it gets to John's question as well. And it's a follow-up to Jim's. Perhaps both the chief of staff and the chief administrative officer might be willing to share both with the RTM and the Board of Finance what it is they are trying to implement with us. I don't know about monthly, but certainly perhaps quarterly, what projects it is that they're planning on, what it is they're trying to implement, what success they have been able to implement, what savings perhaps they've been able to save the town, so that there is some type of ROI that they could share with us and therefore the town that they've been successful in sharing with all of us. Just a thought.
Well, I would say that, they're going to be taking the direction from me. And my chief of staff just started today. So I wouldn't want to really put her on the spot. However, I will announce to you that the person I am interested in, the person I would like to hire for the CEO position is a former chief of staff under Ken Flato, and his name is Tom Bremmer, and he is here tonight. He was, I thought, when I was in local office here, and when he was working for Ken, he was, I thought, a maverick, so to speak. I thought he had a lot of good ideas. I thought he could help me tremendously in understanding the departments in a better way. And again, goes to the whole bipartisanship, right? So people say, well, why would you hire a Democrat to work in your office? Because I think he's the best person for the job, and I think he can make a difference in our community. And again, it's not about me, it's about our town. And Tom has a lot of good experience, and I had, frankly, a 4-hour lunch with him, and I was like, this guy has a lot of good ideas for our town that I like, that I think can actually work. So that's, I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I think most of you know Mr. Bremer and know his work in our town First Selectman's office.
Thanks. This isn't so much a question as much as a comment, and I'd welcome your response, which is that I agree with Mr. Mottola that a full-time chief of staff, I think, is necessary for this position, and I did not agree with the cutting this to part-time several years ago. I think that was a mistake, and I think it was really undercutting the First Selectman's office. So I support that. You've said you've been in office for 14 days. My perspective is it's enough time to be a little frightened by the task in front of you. Not frightened, maybe that's the wrong word, but maybe daunted, and that's why you're looking for more staff. But I think it's too soon, frankly, to make these kind of decisions. I think that you have a new chief of staff. Take a little time, sit with that, see what the needs are, and then move forward. I've also heard a lot from many people in this town. I don't know if you've received the emails. I know other members of this board have. There's a lot of concern that the process is not being followed, that a request for this kind of staff should be put into the budget and we should go through the budget process, and that this should be fully vetted by the town. And I don't think that by calling this an emergency, which I don't believe it is, and asking for us to vote on this, that is following a process that this board is committed to following. That's my perspective. I am also concerned that because you're moving so quickly and you haven't really even sussed out the chief of staff and what's going on, that there may be a duplication of services between what you, your chief of staff, and the Tom Bremer position. I'm very concerned with that. We should be running this town in a lean fashion, and I'm concerned, frankly, that your role will become more ceremonial and less operational. And although this is your vision for, it seems your vision for moving forward, I'm concerned that it's moving a little too quickly and that you're not giving the town the opportunity, the constituents the opportunity to suss that out. I don't think you're giving yourself an opportunity to suss that out. I would prefer that this go through the normal budget process. That's my perspective.
Well, thank you, Sheila, and I just want to be 100% clear. I don't need any more time to know that our town government needs a shot in the arm, and other towns are doing it. We are actually behind, way behind, and I think it's sort of penny wise, pound foolish, right? We have a $400 million budget here, and we're saying that we shouldn't have the talent to work for the town of Fairfield. Trust me when I tell you. Have you ever visited any other towns to see how their towns work? I have. Spent the whole day there. There's enough work to go around for 6 people in that office. It's not a ceremonial position to be the first select woman, because you want 2 qualified people to help you realize efficiencies in the town and modernize the community and move it forward in a direction where we can start actually stabilizing taxes and save money for the people of Fairfield. We are facing the biggest scandal in Fairfield's history. Again, I said, this is taking up tremendous amounts of time. So we could have people in the office helping me to modernize our departments while I'm dealing with a situation that I did not create, but that the people of Fairfield expect me to handle in a way that protects them. And I will do that. But I also want to move our community forward. And it's going to take a lot of hard work. And I can guarantee you, I know what I'm doing. I don't need 7 months to realize that this town is a busy community. You all live here. You got a lot of emails today that you read. I didn't get to read a single email today because I was too busy. Meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. It's a lot of work, but I'm ready to do it. But I want to do it in a way that makes a real difference in our community. Again, we can run this town like we've always run it, or we can do it differently. And if in 7 months, the RTM doesn't want to fund this position because they think it's too much money, then that's a decision that they have to make. But I am asking you, as someone who received an overwhelming amount of support from this community to do something different, I'm asking for your support to do that for them. That's all I'm asking.
Thanks. I wanted to come up and address it from a little bit of a different perspective because Mr. Mottola and Mrs. Marmee both expressed what my first thoughts were when this was first presented to me over the actual timing, and you all know that I'm a big process guy and a believer in the budget. Since I've come to office as the selectman, I've found that some of our priorities are actually of emergency status. They're urgent, right? At the top of the list, I would put, let's put the Phil pile aside for a second. I would put economic development. That's going to be very time-consuming, very slow, but very important for the community. Because without that economic development, in order to keep this organization, this town, affordable, you're going to be facing some very tough budget decisions, particularly with revaluation coming. And economic development is not going to happen overnight. And we need to get on that as quickly as possible. As that is ramping up, you do have to deal with the fill pile. And the fill pile issues, based on the discussions we've had both in executive session as well as what the first select woman and others have had with DEEP, is a significant concern. And I would tell you, in my opinion, it is of emergency concern from the standpoint of we don't know what the next ruling is. We don't know what the next shoe to drop is. We don't know how long it's going to take to remediate. We don't know what the discussions with the unions and the testings are going to hold. We don't know what's going on with the community as we advance further in this. And that needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. Third, the budget process is in full swing for the town. What are the priorities for the budget process? Where can we streamline? Where can we save money? What is available to us to make us easier to do business with, which was a key campaign platform of Mrs. Kupchak. How do we help our businesses? How do we grow the grand list? How do we be easier to do business with? And how do we do it as efficiently as possible? 7 months. Doesn't sound like a lot of time. We can wait for the budget, right? It's easy to say that. When you think about it, though, or when you do the math, 7 months out of a 4-year term represents 15% of that term. And that's why the sense of urgency to address both the fill pile and economic development, as well as the budget prioritization. And let me stress one other thing that this board is all too aware of over the last 2 months. 4 letters, WPCA. $16 million in cost additions on projects that essentially have already been approved, as well as a very large, significant replacement of the treatment plant that needs to be approved and funding decided upon over the next year or so. These are 4 significant issues that can't wait 7 months. And I, just like all of you, would rather do something like that, but don't feel that's possible at this point in time. I want to give some credit where credit's due. I want to credit Mr. Tetro in his last administration. I want to credit Mr. Hibson. I want to credit Mr. Merritt for doing what is an old corporate strategy and saying there's open positions here, let's wait a little bit. Let's see if we actually need them. That's what they did with the animal control officer, and that's what they did with this library staffing position, which is really a library accountant position that doubles at the circulation desk. Both those positions haven't been filled in several years, if you heard earlier tonight. So service levels will not suffer. So you can fund the critical positions that can support the work related to economic development, fill pile, WPCA, and budget prioritization without impacting town services. I also should give a shout out to the head librarian as well as the police chief and the head of animal control for working with that. This proposal reduces the budget by 1.5 head count. And oh, by the way, the thing that sold me on this proposal, in which I talked a lot with Mr. Mayor, this is not a financial gimmick. This is not a one-timer. This isn't dipping into the surplus that this board has done so much to protect. This isn't one-time revenue increases. This isn't pulling something forward. This is actually real reduction in spending to pay for a different prioritization and allow them to address what's going on. It's related to the budget. It's not related to actual spending on that score. So that's why I supported this proposal when it was brought to me, and I looked at it, tried to look at it the same lens I did when I was sitting where you guys are. So I appreciate your time and let me go on, but I just wanted to give you my perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, I got here a little early tonight, and Jerry, our FairTV director, producer, said, Chris, we need new equipment. He goes, but I'm afraid to ask for it in the budget process. Now I'm the charge of the budget committee for the new people here. And I said, Jerry, it's your job as a good steward of FairTV to ask for this. If you've watched any of these budget cycles over the years, a department comes in and asks for a lawnmower. I look back the year before and I say, did you ask for that lawnmower last year? No, we figured it out. If you ask for things more than a couple times, to me, that's real need. I read all the emails today. I read all the emails saying, Mr. Tetro didn't need 2.5 people. Why does Ms. Kupchak need it? Well, you know what? We didn't cut the first selectman's chief of staff. It was an RTM decision, right? But the first selectman never came before us and said, you know what, guys, reinstate this. So 2017 budget, it came out. 2018 budget, didn't ask to increase it. 2019 budget, 2020 budget, did not ask to increase it. So by my simple rules of capital, if you don't ask for it, you don't need it. I tell every department, if you really want something, keep asking for it. We have the right to keep saying no, but if you don't keep asking for it, you ask for something 2 or 3 times, I start taking notice. I appreciate the fact that you're here on your 14th day and not waiting 7 months and going, oh, you know what's budget time, let's talk about this. Because, you know what, we need to do something different. I agree. And I think most of the people in this town would agree that going forward, we need to do something different. And I have a very similar situation at work, right? We need to get past some of these risks and move on and see what we can do. And the burden of proof is on our new chief of staff and our hopefully soon-to-be CAO to show to the RTM in May, you know what, we're adding value to this town, and if they do that, then I certainly hope the RTM supports it. But I'm going to support this motion tonight, and I'm going to transfer this money, or vote to transfer the funds.
I have a question for Mr. Mayor. I just want to get your thoughts, considerations on this proposal. Okay, not only financially, but you've been in the office now for, how long have you been CFO?
6 years.
6 years? It's only been 6 years? 7.
35.
Is it like 5 years, Bob? Long enough. Long enough. So just give us your thoughts financially on this position, and the proposal in general, the positions. You spent a lot of time looking at this as well, and just give us your thoughts.
Okay, actually, let me start this way. I started at town as the chief of staff. I don't know how many people know that and remember that. When I served as chief of staff, I was putting in 50, 60 hours a week, every week. Because there were significant there was and there are significant challenges in the town. You could, and in other words, if there was two of me, we could have worked 100 hours a week. Basically, the work that gets done is defined by the resources available. It's not defined by the work that needs to get done, that should get done. If you look at the document, the salary comparison, position comparison document, you can see that, you know, Bridgeport has 7.5 positions, Stanford 6 positions. I mean, everybody's got more positions in the town of Fairfield. When I was the chief of staff, and then when I became the CFO, some of the work that I was doing as chief of staff came with me because the resources weren't there in the first selectman's office. I thought the position was the office was underfunded then. I thought it was a poor decision when the chief of staff position got cut by half. And if you think about it, what this is doing, it's really bringing back the first select person's office to the same level of staffing that it was 3 years ago, before the one position was cut in half. 4 people. It's just realigning the job assignments. It's bringing in people with maybe more, would have a higher skill set, more experience at different functions. So from my, and I still work 50 hours a week, right? We haven't changed 50, 60, but no, from my position, the town first selectman's office has been understaffed for a long time, given all the various needs. And I think Tom did an excellent job of talking about what's out there right now. And it's the pile, we really don't know what's going to happen, how much energy, how much work that effort is going to take. Deep's involved, there's talk, I don't know how real it is, that the Fed might get involved. There's a lot of work to do, and you can just keep doing it. And so, yeah, I think we've been understaffed. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's past due.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other thoughts from the board? And I'll open it up to public comment. Ms. Charles?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank Ms. Kupchak for taking some time to speak with me. I'd like to say I'm in full agreement with generally with the goals you've outlined. I think that our town government is in desperate need of modernization in many respects. I've been a victim of some of the manual processes that we have. I kind of rolled my eyes at your description of the payroll sheet. We shouldn't be doing those things. And I agree that we need to look at that. And I think that those are all goals. I'll tell you what some of my concerns are. And I did read all 30 or so or more of the emails today that came from the public, and there is a real concern. I heard the word transparency a number of times. I know you care about that. And there's a real concern on the part of the public that this is being done through a budget transfer and not through a process that's being vetted appropriately. I'm not going to buy into this notion that it's tonight or 7 months from now, because that doesn't have to be the case. We got information put on our desk, as you know, when we walked in here. We could defer this a month. We could have a chance to look at it. We could have a chance to ask questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be deferred for 7 months, but I'll give you an example. I mean, I looked at this benchmarking that we have with the towns, and I don't know if these are the right towns to look at. I don't think we should compare ourselves to Bridgeport or Stanford. I took a second and I Googled Milford, and it looks very different. They have lower costs than us, and they're a town about our size. So I don't know what that means, but I do know that I haven't had the appropriate opportunity to really consider whether this is the right analysis. And I think we need a reasonable amount of time to do that as a board. That's what, that's our function. We should be able to look at the data and to do the right due diligence so that we can, my hope would be so that we could unanimously get behind something that supports the goals and that will not be turned over in 7 months by the RTM, because that, to me, is the absolute worst outcome. So that's part of my concern about this. I'm sensitive to the public input. Maybe some of the people that wrote emails are here. I appreciated hearing from them. I think they should be heard. Maybe you've convinced a bunch of them tonight. If so, I think that's great. But I know for me, I think we need a reasonable amount of time to evaluate some of the data that's been put in front of us and to consider what questions we might have. I also think in terms of, while I understand you've spoken to other towns, and that's great, I think that's very important. Again, in my mind, what's missing from this is sort of the business case. We've talked vaguely about what the goals are and what this, I think the chairman, referenced, how do we know we're going to have success? What exactly are these positions going to accomplish? I mean, if we said, okay, we think we can, we have a goal of $1 million in cost savings because we think there's these opportunities in various places. We think we have, X goal through economic development because these are areas we can focus on. To me, I think that the business case, the ROI, should have that in it before we commit to spending the money, and rather than saying, we need this, and then we can figure out, what it's going to bring to us. And maybe I'm misunderstanding some of that, or it's not all here, but I would like to support this because I understand the general goal, but I just reluctantly would have to say that I just don't think we've had enough time to consider it. I'm sensitive to the 7 months. I don't think we should have to take 7 months, but I think I need more time to do what I'm supposed to do and really consider this appropriately. So I don't know if you have a reaction, but just wanted to convey that thought.
Yes, thank you. And again, I'll reiterate that I ran to do this because I care about doing it. I don't want to just do what we always do for 7 more months. Now, again, this is a transfer of money that's already in the budget. It's already there. It's right there. And for the next 7 months, I can be in high gear with 2 top-level people doing the people's business every single day. That, to me, is valuable, extraordinarily valuable. And then everyone can have time to review and look at it during the budget season and decide then if you want to include it in the budget. I'm not asking for anything outrageous. Our town doesn't have enough staff to run it. We have almost 65,000 people. And all of you are elected officials, and you know how engaged our community is. They're very engaged. And they want to be responded to. They want information. And they want their elected officials to do a really good job, and the people who work for them in town government. Because I'm not the only one who serves the public. So does every single person who works for this town. And there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. We all know it. And they're not going to get fixed unless we have appropriate, talented staff. That's the bottom line. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're never going to get an Amazon to come to our metro center like Stratford did if everybody's just dealing with what's coming across their desk. And it's not because I'm new, and I know Mrs. Marmion thinks that that's why. It's not it. I've been involved in government for a long time. I've run a business for 30 years. I know what I need. I know what I need to be successful, and this is what I need. And I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not. I'm asking for the appropriate staff to run a business, a government that serves a lot of people. and that has a lot of needs, and is suffering a massive scandal, that most of these other places don't have to deal with. But they have the right staff, and they don't have this scandal that they're dealing with, this public health emergency, this public trust issue. They're not dealing with it. I am. So I'm really asking you to consider giving me money that's already in the budget to be able to help move our town in the appropriate direction. And then in the next budget cycle, when it comes up, the budget comes up, if you don't want to vote to put it in permanently, God bless you, don't do it. You'll have a lot of time to look and actually evaluate how my new staff does for our community. Our community. Because again, I'm going to say it over and over, this isn't my staff. This is our community's first select woman's office who serves the public. The office I'm in, that's the people's house. That's their place. It belongs to everyone in our town. And I'm just asking you, I'm pleading with you to give me the tools to do the job that the people ask me to do for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coquette. Mr. Tiston? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. I just had another thought in response to Mr. Charlton's comments about liking to look at it from a perspective with goals and objectives, predefined, whether it's how much is a grant that's going to grow, how much, what's the dollars worth of savings. I want to talk about one thing that happened when I was the chief of staff. It wasn't in a job description, wasn't something I knew about before I came to work for municipal government. But it wasn't something that was recognized in the town at the time. But the town was, for its Medicare drug program, was in a government program called RDS, Retiree Drug Subsidiary Plan. And in my position as chief of staff, I read lots of journals and articles trying to learn and figure out what to do and what to focus on. And I read about a program called EGWIP, Employee Group Waiver Plan. And in investigating this, I realized that it had significant benefit, or appeared to have significant benefit compared to the RDS plan. So I contacted an actuary at Hooker & Holcomb, talked about it, and it took a while. It took a year and a half to transition to that plan. It wasn't in a job description, wasn't something that could be predetermined because nobody knew about it. Being in the EGWIP plan reduced the town's OPEB liability by $10 million, just from an actuarial perspective, and saves the town's ADAC $750,000 a year. These are the types of things, if you hire the right people to come into a position to look at what is going on and has the time, the resources, and the purpose to identify what they can do, a lot can be done. And I think there's a lot that could be done in Fairfield, and that's why I really support what First Lady Kupchak is doing, proposing.
And I guess my question or statement sort of goes along with what Bob was just alluding to, which is, it actually gets to a question on the job description on this subject. Underneath the Deputy Chief of Staff, it says, prepares First Select Woman's correspondence ranging from support for grants, support for recognition or award applications, congratulations letters, and so on. But there's been a little bit of confusion in my mind in some of our meetings about how grants are requested. In different departments, it's my understanding right now that grants are requested on an as-needed basis, and Mr. Mayor was just alluding to
just one instance where the town, saved some significant money through his chief of staff role that he had at that point in time. So perhaps, as alluded to in this job description, I don't know if it's under the deputy chief of staff or chief administrative officer role, that can be consolidated or at least followed up on, where the town has some more cohesive strategy with regard to how we can apply for different grants and how much money is, and you know about grants from your state representative days, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and I think, from what I've been told, so far, you're right, we have it's whoever can pick it up in a department, and but they're not focusing solely on it. I think we need more oversight on that, without a doubt, because there's money on the table. I mean, look at the FEMA reimbursement issue, right? There should have been closer review of that whole situation. And I think it's because there wasn't enough people. There was too much coming at the first selectman's office. I think we need people paying more closer attention to what is coming at us, and also the time, like Mr. Mayor said, to review these things and help us get ahead, to actually find out ways to save money, to have efficiencies. And that takes time. I mean, I don't care who you are. Even if you read a speed reader, you still have to read a lot of stuff to learn about new things. And things are coming at you all the time in town government, they just are. So, yes, I agree. I think we need to revamp a lot of stuff. The grants, without a doubt. I think we're leaving money on the table.
Exactly.
Because I think that it's not a coordinated effort, and not something I want to look at.
Yeah, and I think I may have misspoke earlier, and I just want to apologize, just want to clarify a little bit. But it was mentioned again, I think perhaps Mr. Mayor alluded to it as well, that the chief of staff or chief administrative officer could give us an update, either the Board of Finance or the RTM, before the next budget is decided on, as to what they've been able to accomplish between now and 7 months from now. Give us an
Absolutely,
idea.
I would love to do
Right,
that. I would love
exactly.
for I'm gonna say our, not mine, our town's front office to be able to come and talk about the work that we're doing and give an update. I would love to do that.
Then I just want to make one more statement. I want to get to Mr. Charlton's concern and just make an observation. So for those that don't know, and I think you're starting to get to know a little bit, I've had 3 homes in Connecticut. One is Trumbull, the other 2 are Greenwich and Fairfield. So I alternate between Greenwich and Fairfield right now. Greenwich is where I work, but I also have a son that's a police officer in Greenwich. So thank you to Chief Liddy, who I got to know in my days as chairman of the police commission in the town I lived in Trumbull, for a number of years. But Greenwich, as mentioned in this kind of analysis we have here, is probably, in my mind, the closest, from having been in the town hall a number of times myself. It's probably the closest, and their budget, as you can see, is well over $500,000. So they have a population of about 62,000. That's about where we are. In terms of land mass, it's a little bigger. Their police department's a little bigger. I'm sure Chief Liddy wouldn't mind probably their police department size. But in terms of the way their selectmen office is administered, they have a town administrator, which is in essence the same as their chief administrative officer. It'd be a similar.
He gets paid pretty good.
Similar role, different payment structure, yes. But I'm sure First Selectman Camillo appreciates having a chief administrative officer there. But, yeah. Well, but and I just want to say, I think in terms of getting into a new future for the town, we have to take a leap of faith here and support this opportunity to help the First Selectwoman and support these positions and try to realize that the town has to make some much needed changes. I've been in the town hall, and a lot of it is watched as in awe of trying to see her get organized, and it's quite an accomplishment of what she's been able to do so far. So hopefully we can move forward and get some of these new advances implemented that she wants to take advantage of. So I encourage her to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about the renovation. You're proposing a renovation of some sort of your office. Could you explain, is that because you anticipate new staff and need to structurally change the office so that you can put them somewhere, or what's your thinking on that?
So, Mr. Mayor put some money in the budget to the painting, all the painting in all the offices. The entrance, not where the mural is, but all the offices in there. I mean, the paint is, it's horrible. And so painting the walls and new curtains, because the curtains are horrendous. And it's a depressing place, actually. It's a depressing place, and it's our town's town hall, and quite frankly, it doesn't look nice. So, and for the people who come visit our town, it should look clean and neat. I am looking at potentially putting up a wall to add another office, which is approximately maybe they said about $3,500. So it's really not that much, but just to freshen up the place. The floor's coming up in couple of in my office, the floor is literally, it's up and falling apart, but it's just really painting. And some of the furniture, like for Jen's desk is like 1970 oak. I wanted to find some decent used, good-looking used furniture so it looks like nice when people come to the town hall, so that it doesn't look like it looks. So just to make it, just spruce it up a little bit, so we can be more a little proud of the way our town hall looks.
So it's the first select woman's office, not the town hall, is that correct? Or is
Well,
it the
actually,
entire
that
town
whole
hall?
suite of offices. We're
It's
both
the suite of offices.
suite
for
of
the first select
offices,
woman.
and I'd like to also have the walls painted in the first and second floor hallways.
Is that something DPW can help us with, or are we hiring
I'm
external?
looking into it. Obviously, they would be able to help us, but it would be some cost to it.
The reason I'm asking is because I didn't understand it was decorating versus
Painting.
Renovating the office to accommodate new staff. So thank you for that clarification. I have had emails from people saying, if we're looking at this, where are we with departments such as the building department and zoning, who have been promised sort of structural changes for quite a long time?
Yeah, I'm
And
looking
there's-
at that. There's
a lot of concern
There was a study that was done.
that they've been waiting for a long time. and
Right,
that
there
we're
was-
putting decorating
Well, it's
over
not
this.
decorating, actually, it's just painting and adding a wall for another person.
So my comment is, again, thank you for answering my question. It's more a comment of perception, that the perception of spending town money for something like decorating or painting, whatever it may be, when we have other matters. And it's a bigger concern for me, because we're going into a budget process where you are going to be meeting with department heads, and you are going to ask them to be lean and mean and to make do or to do the best they can. And for me, this is a perception issue. I understand you want it to look nice, but that's the concern that people are expressing to me, and frankly, I'm going to express it to you, that we're going into a budget process coming from the top. If we're asking for money for something like that, like this, and yet we're asking our department heads to be as lean as possible, I think it sends the wrong message.
Okay, just to be clear, I don't think there's a perception when I'm saying that the walls in the office, I don't think have been painted in over 10 years in the entire building, inside building. I'm well aware of the space, I'm well aware of the space utilization, and I'm working to do some modernizations with that. And my chief of staff came on today, and hopefully my CAO comes on tomorrow, and we're going to meet with each of the departments. And I want to talk about how we're going to because there's a lot of space in Old Town Hall that's not being utilized. There's a lot of good ideas that we can utilize this space much more efficiently and proactively for these departments. I completely agree. And I am willing to roll up my sleeves and go paint with DPW to make our town hall look better, if that helps with the perception.
Thank Thank you. And what I just neglected to say is, again, I don't view this as an emergency. This is an emergency meeting for funding. And in my mind, I respect what you're saying, but I don't agree with it being in this meeting,
Well,
part of this
also
meeting.
just for an office too, for the CA, because you wouldn't have one.
Okay. Want to go to public comment? I just want to make a comment though before I do. Mr. Mayor, if you could just listen, I want to just get some verification. In the past, this board has been accused, as we all know, of micromanagement. As recently as last May, this Board of Finance was accused of micromanaging the DPW, when in essence, in my opinion, what we were doing was providing financial oversight on the DPW. And we were just talking about one line, one budget line, and it had to do with paving, our paving subject. Now, the way I look at this is we have a new CEO. She's requesting that we transfer funds to restructure her department. She's asking because she has started, she has put a plan together, at least the basics of a plan. She feels she can't wait 7 months. There is no additional cost to the town, correct, Mr. Mayor?
Correct.
There's no reduction in services,
Correct.
and no one is losing their jobs.
Correct.
The request is $85,000. It does not do the town any harm, and it might do the town a lot of good. It is, even if it's a leap of faith, it's $85,000 that we have that at no additional cost to the taxpayer. It might return dividends. It might be a huge, big win for us. Now, we're a finance board, and we need to look at these finances. I don't know what you need in your office. I don't know if you need this position. I don't know if you need a full-time chief of staff as opposed to a part-time chief of staff. I leave that up to you. You came to us. You feel it was important enough to you and to the town to ask for this meeting before January 7th. And the board, and I thank the board again, we were flexible enough to oblige. But to me, in my view, if it's at no additional, and I'll keep saying this, no additional cost to the taxpayer, we're not increasing the budget. The positions that we're transferring the funds from are vacant. They've been vacant for years. There is no harm. So why not allow the new CEO, who came in the middle of a budget season, why not allow her to staff and restructure as she wishes, and then we measure the success? And that's as plain as I look at it. I think the job descriptions are important, but it's for Mrs. Kupchak to manage. You manage your staff, you manage the restructuring, we transfer the funds. Again, no harm done. No harm done at all, that's a fact, and we may get a return that we're all looking 7 months from now, and we're saying that was the best transfer of funds we ever did, and it was $85,000. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that for me right now, and I'll open up the floor to the public. Just a couple, I don't want to call them rules, but requests. If we can keep public comment to 2 minutes, and we don't allow any questions.
I'll be very brief. My name is Arthur Hirsch. I've lived in this community for 60 years, and I've run my own construction company for 50 years in this community. I've sat on 2 major boards in the community, and I would just like to ask this board to play ball with Mrs. Kupchak and take care of her wishes and see what happens in the next 7 months. And I'm sure she will prove to all of you that that there'll be a success that hasn't been had for a long time in the community. We have a lot of serious situations in the community that we have to adhere to right now and address. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming together. My name is Linda McDonald. I actually have lived and worked in many of the towns you've talked about tonight. I live in Fairfield. I also do commercial real estate in much of Fairfield County. I've lived and grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut. I do commercial real estate there. I also work in, my daughter does things in Stratford, Connecticut. And I can tell you, I understand why you did the comparison against Greenwich, but I think it's a very false comparison. My reason being, again, I own commercial real estate there, so I understand the growth of the town. I think everybody here, being a Fairfield resident, wants the same outcome of growing the town and growing Connecticut from every other state. I mean, companies are leaving the state very fast, and that includes Greenwich. Greenwich has one thing going for them. They have hedge funds. They have money. They have a lot of things most of Connecticut does not have that makes them unique. I've seen my taxes in one of my properties go from $12,000 to $17,000 because of that. And that's a huge difference. Their schools are amazing, far out exceed much of the country. And to say that it's an equal comparison is very deceiving, especially when you look at their town and you go to their town hall. They turn their phones off at 2 o'clock because they don't take questions, because they're working. So you can't look at statistics of how many people they have, because that's just not a true comparison. You walk those hallways, their doors are shut. You're not allowed in their buildings for much of their departments for very many hours. So that's one thing. Secondly, Stratford, you cannot compare Fairfield to Stratford. I would hope we are not comparing ourselves to Stratford. Their school systems are night and day. Their vacancies in their real estate, night and day. Vacant building after vacant building. I'm happy for them that they got Amazon, but Amazon will drive out even more businesses. So I'm very much against this. For one, I think we need a lot of transparency in this town, and to call this meeting on a Friday and then hold it on a Monday, that does not show transparency. And I have a big problem with that, because that's one thing in our entire country we are struggling with. If we're trying to bring this town together, we need a lot of transparency. And that there's nothing emergency that needs to be done in literally a day and a half. This is not a life or death situation. I'm not saying it has to be 7 months, but it certainly doesn't have to be 2 days. And that's a problem. And thirdly, I'm sorry, I hope those things lay out the issues, and also you do need to look at other towns, because the towns that she put on the table are not accurate comparisons in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Doug Freed. I've been a resident of Fairfield, Southport for 30 years. I'd like to echo the concerns of the previous resident about the lack of transparency, the fact that this is rushed through, that it's not, that some of the items are not emergency. I'm all in favor of economic development. I'm all in favor of growing the town. I'm all in favor of spending money if need be. And we are probably thin in the selectman's office, or select woman's office now. But I take exception, strong exception, to the comments that there's no cost to moving funds from unspent money from one department to the select woman's office, because, and then spending it. There is a huge cost. It's an actual cost. The cost is, if you're taking $150,000 from unspent money and spending it, you're spending it. And what you're doing is reducing the reserve. As a finance department, you should know there's a balance sheet and there's an income statement. You're taking money out of reserve, and that's taking money out of my pocket as a taxpayer, because the AAA rating that the town has is based not only on how we spend the money, but how we save the money, and what our balance sheet looks like, and what our future obligations are, and our ability to meet those future obligations. And I am concerned that this meeting was scheduled on Friday, and I'm very concerned about the process. I think I'm in favor of expanding the select woman's office and having an additional staff person, but not the way it's being done. It raises a lot of concern among other citizens. I've talked to friends who didn't have a chance to come down here, who didn't send emails, but a lot of people are frankly pissed off that this is trying to be rammed through, and the process should, it's not that it has to be done today. Ms. Kupchak has been in for 14 days, let her get settled, put together a proposal, let the town review it, and come back in a month or two, and then review it when everyone has had a chance to look at it. Your team here doesn't even know what receives the information about the responsibilities of the new positions on the night that they're supposed to vote to spend our money, not just to take it from one pocket to another. So I am very concerned about that. It doesn't create trust, it doesn't create goodwill, and I'm all in favor of bringing the town together. But and frankly, I'd like to make a comment about the letter I received from the first select woman saying urgent message from select woman Brenda Kupchak, which I thought was inappropriate. It has nothing to do with board finance, but it creates mistrust here when there was a political letter involved in there, and I thought it was about the town Phil, so I opened it up immediately, but there was something.
Okay.
But thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Braun. I'm a lifelong resident. I'm a member of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I was on the FairTV Commission before that, and I was on the RTM for 6 years. So for 6 years, we did the budget, we followed the process and the protocol. We would argue till, I don't know, 3 in the morning about $500 here and there. We expected everyone to do more with less. Normally, I would be against any transfer of money without going through the budgeting process. But after listening to everybody, and First Selectwoman Kupchak and Director Carey and Chief Liddy, I would like to suggest a compromise. I would like to suggest that because of the exigent circumstances of the remediation and the cleanup, I trust Director Carey, his opinion that we need to have that money made available so the remediation can continue without any kind of delay or needing to call another emergency meeting or hearing. The restoration of the chief of staff, I would normally be against without following the normal budget protocol, but I believe everyone on the Board of Finance is already fully informed based on the fact that I assume the Democrat side didn't want it to be removed by probably something I might have done when I was on the RTM, I don't remember exactly, but, and I have a sense that it would probably go sailing through, and people are informed of what that position was, and what I think what the job description was. However, the other items, such as the renovation, part of which appears to be necessitated by the new position, as well as the new position, I just think it's too much money, too much decision-making, too much unknown, and I think the normal budgeting process should be followed. I don't think we should subvert that. There could be other things that could use the money, or it could go into the surplus. I think the public is entitled to be more involved. The RTM should be involved before we start spending that kind of money on a position. And I think it would be kind of hard to judge in a few months, you know, whether they're success or not. And you tend to, once a position is in there, it tends to stay there. So I would say let's compromise. Approve what Director Carey suggested, restore the full-time chief of staff, but leave the other things for the normal budgeting process that we follow for good reason. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sharon Pastilli. I'm Deputy Majority Leader of the RTM, and my comments are my own and not necessarily those of my caucus. So in my opinion, I think that this whole process has been rushed. The people of Fairfield deserve to look at the analysis of what the pay levels of the Chief Administrative Officer should be. We also deserve to dig into the total spend of the First Selectman's office. And it isn't lost on me that the GOP RTM cut the Chief of Staff to part-time. So it's okay to have small government when you aren't in control. And it is okay to fund the government when you are in control. That's not a fair way to govern. I would imagine that Mike didn't ask for the position to be reinstated because he prioritized running lean. The request for staff should be fully vetted by the town in the spirit of transparency. The timing of this meeting was not at all transparent. It was scheduled as a special with little notice, and it's also the same night as our RTM meeting. The public has not been able to read through the materials in support of the initiative. I'm a compensation consultant with 20 years of experience working with very large organizations. And typically what you would do is take an inventory of the roles that you have, and then looking at the roles that you're transitioning to. You look at the tasks that they accomplish, the percentage of time on each, and then how they tie to your organizational strategy, and then you look at where those gaps are. And my understanding is in the case of the current roles that the prior administration offered to speak with the transition team so they could go over the responsibilities, and that they were told that the meeting wasn't necessary. That's my understanding, and I will be corrected if that's not the case. So we have a gap in critical information because we haven't even spoken to the prior office to see what those roles and responsibilities were of the people holding those jobs. And that's something you would do in a typical company. The other thing is that when you're doing a comp analysis, you would typically look at least 10 comparables. And you would go through quite a bit of analysis to understand what those comparables should be. And Mr. DeWitt, I know that you and I have had some conversation about this when we both served on the committee for special compensation for the special committee for compensation for the selectmen. And this process, the CCM has a drawn up list of peers that they ask that, you know, that they consider to be Fairfield's comparables. We may or may not agree with them, but Mr. Mayor's analysis, my understanding, only has 5. So the other thing that you'd look at, not only the pay level of that one role, but the combined spend of the first selectman's office. So the analysis was delivered at 6:30. It doesn't have enough comparators in it. There hasn't been enough time. The RTM hasn't been consulted because ultimately we will vote on this in 7 months. And I do agree with the past comments of compromise. This has been rushed, and it's not fair to the people of Fairfield to just push something through like this without more opportunity for us to talk about how we want to move forward.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julie Gottlieb. I'm currently serving on the RTM and served several terms beforehand. And like Sharon, these are my opinions and not that of the caucus. I think there's no argument that the office has been underfunded. And I'm very supportive of the First Selectwoman's modernization efforts. I think no one doubts her passion for the office or the town or the people who live here, and the things that she hopes to accomplish. I'm very glad to see the Chief of Staff position reinstated full-time. I feel like that was something we were arguing for continuously, so no doubt about that one. That said, I just spoke at the RTM meeting earlier this evening about transparency and process being critical for good decision making. And that is the same case here. Budget decisions like this one should go through the appropriate protocol and be heard and approved as part of the budget process. They should not be decided in a special meeting that has been hastily thrown together. I've heard several times this evening from both the board and our First Selectwoman that we're not sure what lies ahead. And this to me is even more reason to be cautious. In my prior life, I served as a consultant primarily in M&A situations, which frequently involve new CEOs, and this is for companies ranging from $2 billion to $14 billion. And again, as Ms. Castelli just mentioned, you do not make changes without doing full assessment. I think, with all due respect, it's been a short period of time. It's easy to change your mind as you go along and gather more information. You may discover other things that require funds or changes in staffing more urgently. And it would be terrible to bring a CAO on board and then realize changes have to be made. I personally don't want to be in a position as an RTM member to get an update on the progress of 2 individuals who have been hired, and then have to make the determination that someone has to lose their job because we didn't follow the budget process this evening. This is not an emergency, and I urge you to follow the correct, transparent process. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hello, Marissa Ringel, RTM, District 10. Although what I'm saying here, I'm speaking for myself as a citizen. And I'm going to start a timer. So we have bringing a little bit of technology and updating the situation here. When I walked around campaigning in Southport, and what I've heard also from Greenfield Hill with homeowners, is that their home values are free-falling. There's extreme distress and the loss of their net worth because of their home values, and everyone is attributing it to the loss of corporations in town and the loss of the attractiveness of our town for corporations and to move into. There's also a loss of desire to move into Fairfield in general. We have lots of homes in Greenfield Hill and Southport around Pequot Avenue that cannot sell, and Sasco Hill Road. So I would call this an emergency. We're in a free fall with the value and perception and reputation of our town. And if you are not moving forward, especially in the pace of the business and technology and what's happening and change and movement lately, if you are sitting still, you are going to further fall off of consideration to companies and home buyers. So I support Brenda's proposal of bringing in new staffing, and I truly believe that if we had better staffing in the First Selectman's office, that perhaps we could have avoided these $10 million problems at the Department of Public Works and at FEMA, the disastrous situation that happened with the poor quality of the soil that lost $4 million there. So I think it's a grave mistake to not move forward today on this staffing. And in the few seconds I have left, I would just like to say Brenda should be on the phone with CEOs from other towns and other states trying to move them into our town and use her staff to fix all these legacy problems. The last point is, if you're going to bring a CEO to try to show them how fantastic our town is into the town hall, you better look professional. And our town hall has chip paint all over it and a lot of rotted wood. So Brenda's right that office needs to be professionalized in every way, staffing and the way it looks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Wackerman. I live at 192 Shore Village Drive, and I'm also on the RTM, and I'm the moderator, although again I'm speaking just individually. I know this has been said a lot, but the transparency issue of this is so disappointing. That it was just announced Friday and then it's today, and coinciding with the RTM meeting, just had the sense of it being kind of snuck through and not what I would hope for. I think the First Select Woman has some great ideas and a lot of enthusiasm, which is awesome. But I agree with Ms. Charlton that I don't think that we know the details here like we should. And I think that there's a basic, this is based on some inaccurate facts. For example, the chief of staff role that just was the part-time role, as I think you all know because this was sent to you today, was much, much more extensive. The former chief of staff accomplished a great deal, much, much more than what you see in the presentation. So I don't think we're really getting a clear picture of what was done before, what could be done by even a part-time chief of staff, let alone a full-time. And I'm not really clear from what I'm hearing what the chief administrative officer would do. It's true that the First Select Woman should be out there developing business for the town, but the former First Selectman did that, and our economic development situation improved a lot. You can do that and run the town without necessarily having to have a full-time person. And then the last thing is these two positions were, I would gather, were held because the first selectman was trying to be lean. It wasn't that they weren't needed, and I'm sure that Chief Liddy and the librarian are saying they can do without them, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be better if we had them. At some point, it was decided it would be good to have. So we are losing that possibility of having a stronger library and a better animal control department, which is needed. Again, I think this is being rushed through, and I don't know why it would have to be voted on now, but it seems to be a fait accompli because the first select woman thinks her CAO will start tomorrow. So I'm sure this isn't even making any difference, but I just urge you to at least postpone this. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You know, I'd like to make, no, please come forward. I'd like to make a statement about transparency. I read a lot of emails today and hearing a lot of people talk about transparency. I'm making a comment, is that okay? I don't think you're running this meeting.
The chairman's got to ask, the chairman's got some point of order. You're not, this is still public comment.
Okay. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to give Mr. DeWitt an opportunity to speak quickly, and then I'll go back to public comment. But thank you.
Yep. Transparency. I sat here for 13 years and things have not been transparent. The first select woman in the first selectman before, first select woman could have hired who she wanted and overran her budget. And we could be sitting here in July talking about a transfer of funds. That's not transparent. You know what's transparent? Transparent is bringing this up before us and putting this out and having this public comment. If you guys think this is easy, it's not, right? This is transparency. I know you're not used to seeing it. This is transparency you're seeing.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. Jeff Peterson, 133 Martin Avenue. And while I am the Board of Ed liaison to this body, I'm speaking as a citizen. I came here with an open mind tonight, tried to listen to all the comments. I do, as a board member elsewhere in this town, I am very sensitive to the fact that things sometimes come up at the table that you're not, you haven't prepared for days, you haven't fully asked questions, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come to this meeting and see the various presentations. Several things are making me favor this proposal for myself. Primarily, the idea that while in normal times we can follow the budgetary, we may have more time to have a reorganization of the selectwoman's office. These are not actually normal times. The thing that Ms. Kuschek mentioned several times is the fill pile, which, as we all know, is an immense issue with large potential consequences for the town, and something that we certainly do not want to let anything slip on. So the fact that 7 months could go by without her staff being organized the way she wants that's important to me. Also, the fact that we are not appropriating new money for this. We're taking money that has already been appropriated. And that also made an impression on me. And if the RTM wants to reevaluate this after the end of this period, that's entirely within their rights to do so. And as we head into the budget season, I'm sure this question will be asked many points in time. And if there is a reorganization that's needed after 7 months, we can do that then too. But also, as Mr. Meyer's testimony, actually, I thought that was very persuasive. That he's much in favor of this role being part of town government. And for those reasons, I think that I would encourage you all to vote in favor of this tonight, even though, as I said, I am sensitive to the somewhat irregular nature of the request. The burden, I think, has been met by the first select board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Good evening, Emmett Hipson, and I would just like to discuss the PowerPoint presentation for 1 minute and to offer an apology to those that were offended by it. And I know Ms. Carberry has sent an email around, deservedly so. So I'd like to address that, the process that went into that. And in developing it, quite frankly, I was one of the ones working on the PowerPoint and preparing the presentation for this board. And in doing that, I was more concerned about in developing the positions that were being added to to the town and not really that focused on the positions that were current in there. The first PowerPoint that went out is not the final PowerPoint, but my understanding is it did go out. I didn't realize it was going out, and to the extent that it went out and that it hurt anybody in their profession or in what was perceived as their work, I apologize for that. I take full responsibility for that, and I would like to issue an apology that any of those that either individual feels is appropriate. But I do apologize for that, and it was not meant to denigrate the work that those two employees did. And I have worked with them, and I respect both of those employees, and I do feel it was important for me to come out and say that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, John McKinney. I'm here today as co-chairman of First Select Woman Kupchik's transition team. Proudly served with Representative Laura Devlin, who's here tonight as well, who in her day job has experience as a human resources expert. Just wanted to comment on a couple of things. First, Representative Pastilli mentioned some inability to work with the prior First Selectman Tetro's office on understanding the roles of the people he had in his office. Let me dispel any notion. First Selectman Tetro and his people were extraordinarily generous with their time in talking to us. We had many very positive, excellent meetings with Kathleen Griffin, fully understood the work she did. Jen Carpenter, as you know, is still working in the office. We did not meet with Nancy Carberry, but we met with Mr. Hipson, head of HR, and others, and we're very well aware of all of the work she did and the very good work she did on behalf of the town. So as a transition team, we were fully aware of the roles that Mike had in his office, what they did. We did reach out to some other communities to see how they restructured or structured their offices. We obviously looked at some salaries in other towns. I will tell you, taking not exactly the job description here, but essentially the job description of a CAO or Chief Operating Officer, talking to maybe a dozen potential candidates, none of whom made less than $170,000 a year. It's very difficult to attract people from the private sector into these jobs, as I'm sure you know. We didn't look at an exhaustive list of all the towns that were comps to us. We wanted to look mostly in Fairfield County. We didn't look at, say, New Canaan or Darien or Westport, which are much smaller towns. Although New Canaan is a much smaller town, spends way more money than we do, and that you would ever accept to be spent in Fairfield. So we have been working on this for some time. One, a structure that might work best for the town, taking direction from the First Selectwoman all along the way, and two, then trying to identify people who would be potential candidates. She obviously did all of the interviews and came upon Jackie Bertolone, who I've known, who's excellent, and hopefully Tom Bremer, who I think all of you know, who we also think is excellent as well. So I just didn't want to, I know we didn't talk to everybody, and I know not everybody talked to everybody, but I would tell you that the transition from our standpoint from the prior administration was excellent, and I think we got all of the information. They gave us anything that we wanted. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kadar Sherworks, and I think I've been here longer than everybody, including the audience, for over 70 plus years. My family has been here 4 generations, and I do have to say, knowing Fairfield in the good old days, compared to what it is now, I have a great concern with respect to, and having been recently retired from General Electric, we're losing industry. And I think Brenda's goal here is, with the 2 additional people she wants to hire, that is in the budget, should definitely be A-okay. And I approve. We need to start bringing new jobs and industry to this area. If you look around, especially in my neighborhood, down at the beach, every other house is for sale. And especially for seniors, it's getting very difficult. Let's hope taxes are not raised, but, which is important. But I fully support her efforts. We've got to do something new. And there's no harm in it. I know there's procedure and there's policy. But in 6, 7, 8 months, let's reassess what has been done with these new 2 positions. And that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, Jill Vergara. I'm the majority leader at the RTM. I'm not speaking as the majority leader. I wanted to address and thank one of the other speakers because it really deeply spoke to me and kind of made me aware of what motivates me and what I think is one of the biggest issues here. I wanted to thank Kathy Braun for speaking. I wish that I had had an opportunity to serve with her on the RTM. I think that it's one of the most special things about serving on boards is to be able to have that conversation with people you maybe normally wouldn't have and learn from them. And what concerns me about this conversation that we're having right now is that I keep hearing people come up here and there's a political divide between the Democrats and the Republicans. What Kathy's statement spoke to me was a compromise that should be made. I do agree and I applaud the first select woman for broaching this issue. I think that I agree that changes need to be made. And I also agree that she deserves to have a full-time chief of staff. And I would support that right now, but I just cannot support the CAO position. I need to know more about it. I need to understand the details more, and it concerns me that these kinds of decisions are being made outside of the normal budget process. I just don't completely understand why this decision has to be made. So to get back to why I thought it was so great to hear Kathy Braun speak was that it's important to not reify these political divides. What Brenda did for the town was, and one of her goals seemed to be, was to bring us all together, to cooperate. And that's really how we're going to move Fairfield forward. If we continue to have these deadlocks between Democrats and Republicans and we can't hear each other, it's just not going to work. I think you need to hear us on this. So I think the compromise would be very worthwhile here, and to go with the chief of staff position and to hold off a little bit longer, possibly during the budget process, but like Lori said, I agree with her, maybe it's just you delaying the decision for a little bit longer so you can parse through those details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, I haven't been here that long. I think it's a mistake to maintain that the public is absent in this process. The voting is transparency, and the public has spoken, and they don't want inertia. We want change.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Donald Riley. I've been a citizen of this town for 16 years now. I grew up in Greenwich. The comparison in Greenwich is unfair. I voted for the first select woman because I did want change in this town, and I believe that we should absolutely she should get what she needs. But doing it this way, being here all night, I am convinced that the fix was in on this thing before I even started the car. I don't even know why we had this meeting. What concerns me is I don't even know what the goals of this position are. We announced this thing on Friday. We're having it on Monday. What are the goals for this role in 7 months? If somebody could lay those out for me, I might have a different opinion. In the companies I work for, if I want to hire somebody, I need to know what their 90-day goals are, 120-day goals are. What is this person going to accomplish in 7 months that we can't wait a couple extra months to decide on? That's what's missing here. What are the goals of this person? What are they expected to achieve in this initial 7 months? Because it sounds like this person only has 7 months to achieve something. Don't know what that is. All I've heard is Stratford, Amazon, want to be like Greenwich. What is this person going to do in 7 months? Lay out those goals for me. Lay out those goals for the citizens of this town. Absolutely, she should have everything she needs, but doing it this way is wrong. As I said, fix was in before I started the car. I believe that wholeheartedly after hearing everybody speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Going once. Twice. I almost got to 3 times.
Dang it, Cam. You waited too long. Cam Iacono, 68 Fife Road. Everyone's giving disclaimers. This is a new thing, but I am on the RTM. I serve in District 8. I happen to be the minority leader. I just wanted to talk a little bit about process, and you all touched upon it. The role of the Board of Finance is to approve a transfer, and that's what's before you this evening. What happens in the First Selectman's office and how it's managed and what those positions are is up to the First Selectwoman in this case. So I just urge you to go back to what this role of this board is, and that's whether or not you should consider a transfer that has been requested of you from the Chief Financial Officer. It's really what your job is. And to all of your points that have been reiterated over and over again, we have the money. No one's losing their job. These are positions that have been sitting vacant. It's money that's just going to be sitting in an account. The public, from what I'm hearing, wants to know what these people are going to do and what they're going to accomplish. Why not allow them to get into those roles and show them what they can do? And if they can't succeed, then in the budget process, those positions can be eliminated. But right now, you have a consideration before you that's for a transfer. And I encourage you to transfer that money because now it's sitting somewhere not being utilized. And those were my tax dollars that you took from me, that we all voted on, that are sitting now doing nothing. And I would rather, personally, as a taxpayer, you take the funds, put them to work, and let's see how we do with them. And if we don't need them at the end of this course, then go ahead and eliminate them. But until that time, it's going to infuriate me personally more that you took my money and you're not doing anything with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Going once, twice? I'll use mine. Okay. I've always wanted to do this. Okay, I'm coming back to the board now for final comments, and I'd like to say final comments. Okay, Mr. Mottola?
I'm going to make a final comment and a motion that you're all going to be probably ticked off about. I'm going to give it a go anyway.
Everybody knows what we're thinking tonight.
I don't. You know, maybe you won't. So I should take that back. You're right, Mr. Dewitt. I apologize. Our next meeting is January 7th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So there's been a lot of good comment tonight from the First Selectwoman, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Flynn, Mr. Hipson, and members of the public and members of this board. My concern is just getting all of this tonight. And I want a little more time to look at it, reflect on it, and make an informed choice. Because you almost have me. I'm like right here, almost ready to vote for this. I don't think it's inappropriate to table this until January 7th, and then we can vote on it. I'm telling you right now, I am so sick of fighting. I've had it. It's all we do in this town. And I think if we had another month, not even a month, it's like 3 weeks away, for us to look at this, there's a better chance you're going to get a unanimous vote from this board. My concern is just getting this stuff tonight. Getting stuff on Friday that was not complete, some of it was incorrect, and I just want some more time to look at it. I think that's an appropriate thing. I think that's a good compromise. So I'm going to make a motion to table this until our January 7th meeting for the reasons why I've just stated.
Ms. Marmion seconds. So this motion is on the table for discussion. Yes.
Thanks. I agree with you, John, because I think a lot of arguments have been compelling tonight. I'd also like some more time, however, and it's not just to read what we just got. I didn't even have time getting home from work to print out some of this information and review it by the time it came through. I want to look at it, and then I want to be able to ask for more information. I mean, we've talked about the comparables. I think we need more on the comparables. I think we need more details, or we need to have the opportunity to ask questions about these positions. We don't have the time, I mean, to absorb this. So I support that motion.
Thank you. I want to make one thing clear. I saw this data when everyone else saw this data. There's no fix in here. And you can laugh all you want. There's no fix in here. I did not see this data 5 minutes before anyone else on this board. Okay? I'm not going to support this motion because I truly think that in 3 weeks, we're all going to be sitting here with the Democratic RTM out there telling us no and micromanaging. Guess what? You're micromanaging the first selectman, just like you accused us of micromanaging DPW. And look how that got us. So here we are. I'm not going to support this. I think in 3 weeks, nothing's going to happen. I read these job descriptions. I would have liked to have gotten them a couple of days ago. But you know what? Like Mr. Peterson, I did come here with an open mind. And I be honest with you, Ms. First Selectwoman, I wasn't 100% coming in here. I think a compelling case was made. And I'll reiterate, I think Mr. Mayor's statements really swayed me too. Having sat in that seat and knowing what's going on, knowing the people that are going to fill these two. I mean, I know Mr. Bremerware very well, and I've heard a lot of things about Jackie. So I'm not going to support this, only based on the fact that I don't think anything can change in 3 weeks, frankly.
Mr. Bates?
Yeah, thanks. There has been a lot of good discussion on this tonight. I'm not going to support the motion to postpone. A lot of stuff has gone through my mind. I was hesitant about this at first, but, thinking about it, what's going to change between now and November and January 7th? I think a lot. I think the state's going to hammer us. I think this fill pile is just going to be a huge time suck on the first selectwoman's office. So, would I be willing to go to the January 7th if something like that wasn't staring me like in the face? Probably, but I think that we're in extenuating circumstances with that issue. I think that's going to take up a tremendous amount of resources and the attention from her office. I got to tell you tonight, Brenda's passion, determination, and the vision of goals that she laid out, and just the way she spoke about it, pushed me over the top. So that's overruling right now John's motion to postpone this, to table it. I just really think we have to provide the resources for that office to dig in and just get to work on this issue.
So I agree completely with John that getting the information 5:30 on Friday is totally unacceptable. Getting information today at 6 o'clock is also unacceptable. I work in Danbury. I was already here by the time I could look at my email. That said, I think this wasn't Brenda's budget. I think she needs the tools to move us forward. And so for that reason, I'm not going to support John's motion, but I think in the future we do need to get information in a timely manner. And I think this is only a transfer. That's what our board does. That is one of our responsibilities. We did it earlier this evening with the fill pile. So I think these positions will be fully vetted with the budget. and we will have those discussions. So they have a few months to show us what they can do.
Thank you, Mrs. Leclerc. Okay. Mr. Matoli, I appreciate your motion. I know where you're coming from. I do think we have the information we need just to make the transfer. And we'll see how this plays out over the next few months. And I do believe moving forward, we would want updates and how this position is going to be measured, but that's up to the first select woman to make that happen. Our job tonight is to determine if we want to make the transfer. So we're going to vote on your motion. All those in favor of postponing the motion to transfer to January 7th, say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion fails 6-2. We're back to the original motion, and I'll ask for any other final comments from the board. There are no final comments from the board, then we're going to vote. Let me find the motion. Which is already on the table. So I'm just going to read it one last time, because it's been a couple hours, but this motion is on the table. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $70,000 from Animal Control regular payroll and $15,000 from Library regular payroll to First Select Woman regular payroll to cover costs associated with department reorganization. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-3. We're on item number 5. Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments? No. We're on item number 5, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Mottola, second, Mr. DeWitt, all those. We're unanimous. Just want to